Welcome to the Producer Review Podcast, the premier podcast for aspiring artists and producers. We discuss production, mixing, recording, and review your track submissions. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. This is Derek, aka Knock Rio, for the Producer Review Podcast. I thank you guys for tuning in to the show today. This past week I've been a little bit busy just trying to find some solutions. I actually was trying to build a native app for the podcast itself, because I think that's kind of a cool way to put the podcast somewhere where everybody can get it right on their phone and they don't have to really go looking for it on other sites. Even though it is on Spotify, it is on Google Podcasts. It's also on a number of different places, iTunes. It's out there. So, but then when you get into those sites, it's kind of like you have to either search for it or you're swimming for it. And I think a native app or a standalone app would be like the way to go. Plus, then we could add other things to that particular app. So it's just kind of an idea that I have. I've been dabbling in building apps, at least for Android through Android Studio since about 2015. Just kind of self-taught, just going on Google, looking at tutorials, going through and following the tutorials and kind of programming it out, just learning a little bit of the JavaScript language. I'm nowhere near a pro, but I've got a couple of apps that I've developed that actually did function. So I have an idea kind of what goes into it, and now I'm just looking at some other solutions because the problem I ran into with those particular apps is that then it had to be redeveloped again in for iOS. So that presents an issue. So I want to kind of head that off. So I've been looking at going into developing a native software through using like React Native to design the app so that it would be compatible with both iOS and Android systems. So that's probably a little bit off the beaten topic here, but just it's kind of production in a way as well, because it's kind of taking all of your ideas and putting them together and solidifying them into a product that other people can use. And I want it to be real simple. This one is actually more simple than the other apps that I was attempting to develop back in the days. So it feels like it should be a lot more simple, but there's definitely some challenges there. But we'll work on it and just see what happens. But hopefully one day we'll have an app for the Producer Review Podcast that you can actually download. But today's topic definitely is not about that. Today's topic is I'm going to be dealing a little bit with the psychology around music contracts, specifically the responsibilities for the parties that are involved. So in the interwebs lately, we have seen artists having complaints about their contracts. Right now, Megan Thee Stallion is the main one that's out there, but there have been others. We had Mace some weeks back talking about his contract with Bad Boy and how he wants the rights to his publishing and all that, and he wants his publishing given back to him. So with these disputes, I think that we should talk about that here on the show, because as producers, at some point, you're going to have to deal with record labels, hopefully, and even at a small level, you have to know what you're signing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, go in depth on it, see what my perspective is on it. Once again, this is my opinion on it. My opinion probably is a little more harsh than others, but it's what I think about it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I don't really like talking about things just because they're popular or just because I need something to say on social media or something like that. I really don't like going that route. That's why I haven't went the whole YouTube influencer route or whatever. That's not really what this is about. This is about real learning for the people that are tuning in. So the topics that we discuss shouldn't be something that's just just something popular right now. It should be things that are going to help people down the line when they're listening to this podcast in 5 years and they discover that this has existed for 5 years, and they start listening maybe from the beginning. They'll hear things that are still relevant to them at that time. I see a lot of that on social media because social media is geared towards the right now, the right now. So a lot of people talk about what's happening right now, or as people who want to be influencers or people who want to continue to develop their following, they have to talk about subjects. So they have to find something to talk about. And so they get on, and then next thing you know, they're kind of rambling on just about things that really are not all that helpful sometimes. It's just something to talk about so that they have something to put out. And I just don't really want to go that route. I'm going to put out things when I want to put them out, when I feel like it's necessary to put it out. I'm just going to do it the way I want to do it. I don't really care about being an influencer. I don't care if there's one person that listens to the show. Honestly, I'm really not that kind of person. I really don't care. I do it because I like to do it. So that's never going to be a thing for me where I feel like I have to put something out because, people are expecting something. I really could care less. I do it just because it's something that I want to do and it's fun for me and I have the time to do it. And that's why I'm here. So let's get back into the subject here. So, right, you would think by now with all the history of record labels and managers and contracts and the disputes that have happened, that maybe, record labels and even managers and people like that would have a perfected contract that would be fair and there would be less cause for dispute. But that's really not the case. But my perspective is a little different. The onus doesn't always sit with the record label only. And I think a lot of times, especially right now, like through social media, it's real easy for an artist to get on and bash the label. And everybody says, oh, well, the label is the one with the power. So they all jump on the label and feel like the label is the only one at fault. But I don't subscribe to that. And we're gonna talk about it in a little bit just to figure out why that's not the case. So I'm going to call attention to some of the elements and ingredients that tend to end up in this recipe for disaster, or at least a near disaster, because it's not always a disastrous thing, as we're going to find out. So let's talk about business in general first. We have to understand the function of a business. So what is the function of a business? So normally a business is created and it solves some type of issue or challenge. So a restaurant prepares food and it sells it as a convenience to people who don't want to cook, right? It's just easier to go out and sit at a table and have someone bring you your food. And while you kind of talk with your family and friends, it's a convenience. So they're solving an issue there. If you go to a dentist office, that exists because it helps people maintain healthy teeth, and they perform surgeries even to repair teeth and things with your mouth. So that's a service as well, but it also resolves some type of issue or challenge. If you have a lawn maintenance company or a landscaping company, that exists to take care of the aesthetics of a home or even some business location. So when people arrive there, they're not turned off by the grass being 4 feet tall or something, or the hedges not being trimmed, or the plants looking crazy. People may not spend money. So you hire a landscaping company or a lawn maintenance company to come out and make your place look nice so that when people come there, they feel comfortable. These are just examples, and I use different examples for different types of businesses. There's a myriads of different types of businesses, but they all exist and they all have the function of solving some type of issue or challenge. Even scam businesses, they solve the challenge of whoever's behind the scam is trying to get money. So, even that has some type of issue that it's trying to solve. So every business has some type of issue or challenge that it resolves. And that's why they get paid to do what they do. So I think you guys kind of got the point on that. So generally, let's talk about a record label. A record label provides a solution just like the rest of these businesses. So what does it do? One, it provides the funding for music artists, including producers, that's why we're here, right, to be exposed to a larger audience, right? It takes money that it gets either from its own accounts or it invests money from other accounts that people have provided to them, because they're not always the ones with the money. They get money from other places in order to put into these artists. They invest that money into marketing and branding of an artist. They're creating them, like the pictures and the videos you see, and sending them to radio interviews and having them make television appearances and appearances at clubs and things. A lot of times they're fronting the money for that to get the person started, the artist started. The label also has connections in the entertainment industry. Those connections will open doors for the artist that the artist, they didn't even know those doors existed, or that the artist doesn't have access to. They can't really open those doors themselves. So the industry has a lot of gatekeepers, and those are the layers of people that you have to meet before you can actually meet somebody who's considered to be influential. You know, these are the people that are the check writers and the people who create the money that those checks are written to deliver. So there's a lot of doors and there's a lot of doorways that have to be open, and the label gives you like a fast pass to get through some of those layers. Whereas if you're just doing it on your own, it takes time. It takes time and it takes money to get out there and travel and meet these people. But the labels can put you into that position quite quickly. So the label also can put artists in touch with producers that can build a project for the artist according to the branding and the marketing and the image of the artist that the artist created or that the label wants to create. So from there, the label can arrange studio sessions in the best studios. Those studios typically are going to be a little bit more expensive. The engineers are probably going to be a little bit more seasoned. The product is probably going to sound just a little bit better. It just is. So those are just some of the solutions a label provides. And this is why people look at going to a label and signing with them, because they're looking to solve the issue of not having those challenges resolved. So labels probably do a lot of other things too, but the main point is that they provide some sort of solution for artists in their careers. So like all businesses, record labels extract a price for their connections, the investments, and the risk that they take. So they don't do this for free, right? What in the world do you really get for free? It's not a whole lot that you get for free. So the most important thing that we will talk about today is risk. That's the most important word here. So think about a new artist, okay? The artist typically is not going to have a following of more than a few thousand people. Even let's say up to 20,000 people on the internet or on their social medias are following them. They're typically not going to have more than that. So how many of those followers really translate into true buyers? Now that's kind of something that's a little bit skewed today, because people have social media accounts that get really big and they're talking about, oh, I got these likes. And, I've got, 10,000 followers and I get all these likes, and that's great and everything. But I come from an era where you actually literally had to sell a CD, a physical CD. You had to get somebody to get up, get dressed, get in their car and go to a store and buy your CD. So that was, I think, a lot harder than somebody who doesn't even have to get out of their bed in the morning. They can just roll over, turn on their phone, find your music online and just play it. Think about the difference between those two things. It's a difference like cooking a meal at home and buying all the ingredients, putting it all together, cooking it, and then sitting down to eat, or going to a restaurant and just telling somebody else what you want to eat. So that's the difference between the two. So people engage in your content and they may like it as a form of entertainment, but do those likes really actually translate into actual spending real money? Will that person pull out their card and put money down on what they liked or something that they saw or some type of entertainment they got from your social media profile. So that engagement is really kind of something that gives artists today, I think, a skewed view of who they are and where they are as an artist at any particular point in time, because anybody can be popular, anybody can go viral, but that doesn't mean that these same people who like what you're doing, even though they're being entertained, are going to actually pull out any money and spend physical dollars with you. Now, the artist too typically has limited funds to produce a real saleable product. That comes from that should tell you right there, because what's the first thing an artist tells you as a producer when you tell them, that you have beats? They tell you they don't have any money, right? This is pretty much all of our headache, right? Artists that never have any money to buy beats. So, or, they only got 20 or 30 bucks for a beat. Like this, they typically have limited funding, which means that all these likes and all these things that they're getting on their social media have not transformed into any money, any real money. It's just likes. So you think about that, they might have a decent studio that they've worked with or some producer that they're working with. That's cool. But it's not going to be at the level of a team that a label can provide them. Now, it's going to be different for every label. Every label is going to be formulated different. But there's some kind of team at the label, somebody who's going to be looking at what are we going to do for marketing? What are we going to do for studios? What are we going to do for production? They're thinking about those things and helping the artist with the thought of that instead of the artist doing it on their own. So typically an artist doesn't even have a saleable product when they're just first starting out. They don't have that product. Now, an artist will also have limited funds to travel. So if they can't buy a beat for $30, then they certainly can't be in 2 or 3 cities in one day, going from LA to New York or to Texas or wherever they got to go to have these meetings with radio or meetings and doing recording sessions in other cities or making new music in these studios. They don't have any money for all this. So they're pretty much arriving at the label with no track record of success in hand. They have a lot of risk to offer. So this is where it's important to understand the role of each player. And artists typically don't understand the role, and the general public doesn't understand the role either. The general public has a whole other view of what the music industry is like. They think that someone signs you and all of a sudden money just starts to fall out of the clouds and everywhere you go, you're stepping on money. And that's just not the way it is. So with understanding the roles of each player, you can understand kind of where you are as an artist or as a producer. You need to understand where you are. By understanding where you are, you're going to figure out what solutions you actually need to go to another level in your career. The label takes risk when they say, hey, we're going to invest in a career that hasn't yet even manifested. So these are people that believe in you at a certain level. I don't care what artists say. If somebody says, hey, come here, sign on the dotted line, I'm going to put some money behind you and your career, they believe in you at a certain level, right? So, it is kind of funny, like years later, the artists say, oh, well, labels don't care about artists. Well, they do at some level. They gave you something to get started. So, that's just normally set out of bitterness without actually looking at the position they were in when they actually signed that contract. So if there is no track record of success, the record label has no idea whether they're going to get their money back or not. Their ROI is not guaranteed. This is a business just like every other business. You can open a restaurant, but there's no guarantee that anybody's going to come in there and sit down and eat, or enough people are going to come sit down and eat so that you can be successful. That's why a restaurant is like one of the worst businesses to own, at least in my opinion, because if it doesn't take off, you're going to lose a lot of money. And then you're throwing away your investment every single day. All that food that you have to cook and prepare, and if nobody comes and eat it, what can you do? You can't serve it tomorrow. You got to throw it away. So, it's just, that's kind of like the record business itself. If nobody comes to play with your artist, you're done. If nobody likes your artist, the artist doesn't produce something that the masses love, you could spend a lot of money and be out that money. So there's no guarantee on the ROI or the return on investment. Now, there's a few other things that kind of come into play and that we've got to think about. So we have the part of the business part. We know what the label's part in it is. We kind of know what the artist's part is in it. But then there's some other things that take place, and these things are going to be things that a lot of times we don't have control over just because of where we are in life. The first one is emotions. So there's always going to be the risk that the artist is not stable mentally. And I've dealt with a lot of artists. I've recorded a lot of artists. I know how sensitive artists can be. I know that emotional behavior is a characteristic of artists. A lot of the things that you see and a lot of things that we find as memes and a lot of the activities that artists are involved in, it just proves that they have a different set of genes that allow them, number one, to be creative. But when things go bad, artists can be very emotional and they can do things that are very out of character. So, even though they may sing great or they might rap great, they may not have any conflict resolution skills. They don't have the ability to resolve issues in a way that benefits everybody, or at least is settled amicably. So when they get involved in a situation where it's a tough situation and you need to make a business decision on which way you're going to go, they react emotionally, which typically means they're going to act irrationally. They're not going to think from a position of logic or problem solving or real conflict resolution. They're going to just kind of act out and lash out because they're angry. And when you're angry, you don't think straight, right? So, and especially when money becomes involved, then it's 10 times worse. So when those emotions go unchecked, the artist can put their career and their reputation and the label reputation at risk. How many artists are in jail, like right now? How many artists have been to jail that you know of? Because they were doing something, maybe they got involved in something even prior to being artists that maybe they shouldn't have, or are fighting or attacking people and doing things like that. Like, you see it all the time. You see they wear their emotions on their sleeve. And if they've got money, they feel like, oh, well, I'll just pay the lawyer. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and I'll to this person, and then I'll just pay the lawyer. And that's just the emotional, level that the artist can be on. And you think about the label is taking risk with that because they don't know what this person is going to do, especially in our genres of rap and hip hop. We've got a lot of young people involved. Nothing wrong with being young, but it's just not having the wisdom and experience of age and time and the experience of dealing with different situations. Now they're put on the front line because everybody can see them. Everybody can see what they do. And now their emotions have to kind of match the persona that they are putting forth as their brand as well. So if the person is somebody who can't be tested, I mean, it's not even just the music. It's just, some of the places where we grow up, you can't show weakness. So if they feel like something's making them look weak, they're going to act a certain way. It's just going to come out a whole other way. So all of that puts the label at risk. The label has no idea what's going to happen. Is my artist going to do something and then I got to go bail them out, or are they going to do something they can't even get bail, and now all of a sudden, boom, they're stuck. And my artist that I spent all this money on is going to jail for 3 years. It's just a risk for the label. Now, the other thing besides emotion is ego. So if you take the emotion and you mix that with ego, this comes from being somewhat known, having a feeling of being special because their talent, the talent that they have, it becomes a recipe for disaster. You mix emotion and you mix ego, you're going to have a problem. This is where lawsuits come about. either by fans who have altercations with artists or other interested parties like managers and producers and people who are on the team of the artist. But then it's perceived that, oh, you're not on my team, so the artist kind of gets their ego involved with it, and they feel like they're above and that they're running everything. And then, all of a sudden there's either lawsuits or there's fights or altercations. People have been stabbed, people have been shot. This is what happens. So that's a risk too. The label is dealing with a very high risk situation from the emotion and ego standpoint. One thing that the artist doesn't control a whole lot of times is public opinion either. So if I think about it, what if the public just doesn't like the work of the artist? There's been several albums that dropped this particular week, in the last probably month or so, and immediately people have panned the work, said this is not what we're expecting, this is not good. And there's always going to be people who do that. There's always going to be people who don't like the work that the artist put out or whatever. Don't know why. It's maybe they're expecting it to be, some holy grail of hip hop or some holy grail of rap, and they don't get that, and then all of a sudden everything sucks. And so the public might actually put that persona out about your music. And then what do you do? Or maybe you're a producer and you make an album with an artist and the tracks just don't resonate with the public at that time. A lot of this is timing. As a producer, a lot of what you put out is timing. What you sound like has to sound a little bit forward instead of going back. I think that's one of my own personal issues as a producer, is like my sound. I don't think it sounds like what today's music sounds like. I think you could mix it as a producer. I think I can probably make it work. But my tracks are not going to be 808, based. Pretty much now it's like the track doesn't have an 808, nobody's listening. Or my tracks might have an 808, but it's not the dominant instrument. And it's almost like nothing else really has to be a real instrument now. Everything, if the 808 is right, then people bounce to it. And eventually that's going to go away. So, because people are going to just get tired of the sound. It just happens. People get tired of everything. Every nuance to the genre of hip hop that has come has also gone. But it'll stick around, but it won't be dominant, is what I'm saying. So, so what if the sound just isn't right? Like, we saw Lil Wayne's album come out, and for me, it sounded like he was trying to work with the tracks of today, but that's not what he built his fan base on. That's not what he built his career on. I don't think that's where his voice shines. It really just sounded out of place for him. It sounded like he's rapping from a different era than where these beats come from. A couple of them was tight though. I liked what he was trying to do, but I don't think it fit him the way that it should have. So that's just a public opinion. There are people who said that as well. So the label is going to be forced to consider whether or not to continue funding the experiment with the artist. It's literally an experiment. And if the public opinion turns out that they don't like what's going on, the record label is a business. It's got to decide whether it's going to continue spending money and try to resolve the issue, or try to see if the public opinion changes, or if it's time to cut the artist loose. So it's just a business. That's all. So think about it. If you sell shoes and people decide that shoes are not important, then you have to consider not selling shoes, right? So, because if nobody is coming in buying shoes, then you don't have the revenue to support the business, because nobody wants to spend money on shoes. So you better find sneakers or some sandals or something else that people are willing to buy and sell that. Maybe some boots. You know what I'm saying? You got to find something else. So the artist or the producer might be just ahead of their time. Maybe shoes are going to be the big thing in 5 years, and the people just miss it right now because it's not now. It could be, or they could be late. They could be behind the curve. So the business doesn't have the luxury of you being behind the curve. They have to be on what's happening now, because if you don't sell what people want now, you're not going to have the revenue to continue going. So this is why signing an undiscovered talent is very risky. So producers, and especially great producers, have this ability to spot talent, and they have a way of picking and choosing which talent is going to result in a profit. And the science of that is definitely inaccurate. There are a few who have been in the music industry who have been really good at picking out talent, figuring out what's going to work, and signing that talent and turning them into megastars. And they've done it with more than one person, or they've been on teams that have done it with more than one person. So they kind of know what they're looking for. But in general, it's going to be an inaccurate science. So in the area of contracts, we've seen a lot of high profile artists just kind of going through their contract situations. Recently, there have been a few. Mace, this Megan Thee Stallion girl. You think about situations in the past like TLC, the struggles they went through. Prince, he went through his struggles. Lil Wayne with not being able to release the Carter 5. Like, there's a lot of situations like this where the contracts are not right. For producer wise, you think about Manny Fresh not even getting paid for doing all that work that he did with Cash Money. So some of them have been real public about it. So, at least in the recent past, we've seen a lot of people bashing their labels and talking about them robbing artists. It's just kind of a general statement that's made in these situations by the average person that hasn't even ever been in the business or in the recording industry, saying that labels rob artists. It's just been since like the beginning of labels ever beginning. They've been always called the thieves. So that's we see a lot of this in the public. So we have to talk a little bit about what a contract is too, because we talked about what a business is, but now we need to talk a little bit about what a contract is. So a contract is an agreement between two or more parties that obligates each party to complete certain tasks or certain milestones within it. So with the commencement and the completion of those tasks, there's either going to be some money or some other goods that change hand. Okay, so we got that, right? We got what a contract is. It's an agreement between two parties, an agreement, and people sign their name to it. So the contract's going to have a certain date it's going to start, and it may have a possible end date, or it's going to have some type of end goal. So everybody's going to be working towards a particular goal, and as that goal is completed, then the contract ends. Or the date comes, that contract ends. So everybody who signs on the dotted line is obligated. Okay, this is not something that's what's the word I'm looking for? Something that's wishy-washy, or something that's that you just wake up one day and say, I don't really feel like I should be in that contract anymore. I don't feel like I want to do what's in the contract. You're obligated. That means you must complete the terms of the contract until the term of the contract is complete, or until the objective has been fulfilled. So an artist might agree to deliver a certain number of albums to a label for production and sale. The label might agree, well, if you do that, we're going to give you a certain amount of money up front, and then as time goes on, we're going to pay royalties in the form of points after, of course, we get a certain amount of money returned to us. So, and now with the 360 deal, that extends to more things, like when you go out and perform, this is what we get paid. It used to be more like the artist would take the bulk of the money and they would pay their manager or whoever's helping them with their tour or their club dates and all that type of stuff. It would kind of be split between those two, and the label really didn't get part of that performance money. But now with a 360 deal, you're getting part of that. The label is getting part of that performance money as well. And it's interesting because I see people online saying, oh, it's a 360 deal, meaning that the money goes out of the label and it returns to the label. That's not what a 360 deal is. It's just saying 360 just means that they're involved in all aspects. So if you're selling a t-shirt at a venue, they're getting a piece of that too. They want a piece of everything because they're not selling physical records anymore. No one's selling physical records, and that's where they were making the bulk of their money before. At least in the beginning, when an album comes out, when that sale happens, they're getting, dollars on a CD versus the artist who is getting cents. So now that doesn't exist, they found another way to get money for the risk that they're taking, right? For the investment that they're making. So the number one thing that everybody involved should know is what the contract says and what they're obligated to do by the terms of the contract. That should really go without saying, because I don't know any other business where people sign a contract and they think that it's not important to know what's in it. But everybody should know. Artists should know exactly what the terms of their contract are, what their obligations are under the terms of the contract, what they're going to get paid for what they're doing under that contract. Producers need to know what their lease agreements say. You need to know what it says. What are you supposed to deliver, and what are you supposed to get in return, and for how long? Those are not real hard concepts. Now, it may be a little bit hard just because maybe you're not familiar with some of the words that are used, and because maybe this is drawn up by a lawyer or somebody, and the words that might be used might be a little more difficult to understand if you're not familiar with them. But just because a contract may be long, or just because the contract has words in it you might not understand, it doesn't mean that you can skip any parts. The part you skip could say anything. It could say that, hey, if I don't sell enough albums, you can cut my foot off. Like, you don't know that if that's buried in there somewhere or something. Like, you really don't know what's in there. So you need to read all of the parts and not skip any of it. Right? So the best thing you can do if you don't understand some of the wording is look it up. We got Google, people. You can look it up. There's no reason for you not to understand your contract. Then you have people that do understand your contract and can tell you exactly what it's saying and exactly what it means, and can run you through scenarios of what will happen if you do and if you don't meet the standards of the contract or the obligations. And that usually comes in the form of an entertainment lawyer. It could also be your business manager. So if you do not understand what's going on, you need to get someone who does. I don't even believe that we're having this conversation and even saying that to someone, but this is what needs to happen. And the other thing is this: if you have a friend, or you have a parent, or you have a relative that doesn't have any experience with reading contracts, or just even being in business in general, they probably shouldn't be advising you about a contract. I don't care what they say and what authority they have over you, or what relationship they have with you. You cannot put your career in the hands of somebody who does not understand what they're talking about. Okay? Would you go to a car mechanic and ask him how to cook? I mean, typically a car mechanic is not going to be able to advise a trained chef on how to cook. A chef might ask another chef with more experience, but he's not going down to the local, car mechanic and asking him how he should flambe some shrimp. You know what I'm saying? This is not going to happen. So why are you asking people to read your contract that don't know anything about the business and have never been in the business? This is dumb. I was reading a book, The Richest Man in Babylon. If you read that book, he'll tell you, he's telling you the story of the guy, and the guy told him how to invest money or whatever. He asked the guy, how did you get rich or whatever? And the guy told him how he got rich, and he's like, these are the things I need you to do. So for a year he did it, but then he took his money and he gave it to a guy, I think it was like a brick maker or something. I think the guy makes bricks. But the guy told him he was going to go to another city and buy jewels, like, jewels and gems to bring back so that they could sell them for a profit. And so the man took his money and went to the city and bought jewels and gems that turned out to be glass, and they lost all the money. So, and so he asked him, he said, why did you go to this dude, who makes bricks and ask him about jewels? He don't know nothing about jewels. He knows about bricks. So you lost all your money. So the guy had to spend a whole another year putting money together again, and then he finally did it the right way. He gave his money to the guy. I forget what business he was looking to get into. I think it was a brass maker or something, and they bought brass and they made these things and they made money. So just the principle of that story is that you shouldn't be asking people advice who don't know what they're talking about or don't have an experience with what you need advice on. This is very elementary. And this is why, I have the tone that I have and the feeling that I have about these situations when I see artists with contracts and they don't protect themselves. So you get the point, I think, where I'm going with this. You have to take responsibility. As a producer or an artist, you need to protect yourself. When you sign a contract or agreement, it's binding unless for some reason by law you or the other party are not legally eligible to sign. So maybe you're under the age of 18. So in some states, I'd imagine maybe not all, I don't know the law in every state in America, but in most places you need to be 18 before you can sign a contract. And if you're not 18, then you need a parent or guardian or somebody to okay the deal on behalf of the artist. But that doesn't mean that your parent or guardian is one who decides what should be in the deal or can decide whether the deal is good or not. They still need to hire a lawyer or somebody and get counsel. And that's what the expectation is. Okay? The expectation is that you had someone look at your business and look at the deal before you sign it. That's the expectation of the law.